anything? Have you ever thought about where that feeling, that obligation, actually comes from? This isn't just a history lesson, it's a journey to the very beginning of human trust and trade. We're going to explore the first contracts ever made, uncovering the ancient origins of debt, and how these foundational agreements continue to define our lives today. Let's start before coins or banks, before parchment and seals, in the small circles of people who needed one another to make it through the week. When a hunter dragged home meat that would spoil by morning, sharing wasn't charity, it was insurance. You fed tonight because I fed last month, and when your luck runs out, the village won't let you starve. No one wrote that down, but everyone remembered. That memory, who owes, who gives, who shows up, was the first ledger, scratched not in clay, but in minds. At first, this reciprocity was loose, the kind of debt anthropologists call generalized. You didn't count fish for favors. You signaled belonging by giving without asking. But even loose ties carry threads of expectation. The friend who always takes and never gives gets quietly cut from the circle. A promise is born without ever being spoken. I will help you as others helped me. Obligation matures from kindness into structure, from warmth into framework. As life grew more complex, so did the social math. Debt, at its core, is time braided into trust. You give now, I repay later, and we both believe the future will arrive with enough safety that later exists. In small groups, enforcement was social, reputation, gossip, banishment. That might sound harsh, but it worked. The community didn't need a courthouse if everyone's memory and pride were on the line. Over and over, these invisible contracts made survival possible because they smoothed the bumps between feast and famine. Then something huge shifts. People start planting in one place, harvesting more than they immediately need, and building lives that stick around longer than a season. Agriculture brings surplus. Surplus brings specialization. The hunter doesn't just hunt. Someone else weaves, someone brews, someone keeps the granary keys. It's a brilliant upgrade, and it comes with a math problem. With more people doing different things, you can't keep every promise in your head. You need ways to track, compare, and standardize who owes what to whom. So communities invent memory outside the mind. Picture notched sticks handed between neighbors. A tally split in two where the jagged edges match like a key, preventing fraud. Imagine clay tokens representing measures of grain sealed inside clay envelopes, bulle, that could be broken open to verify what was promised. On river plains from Egypt to Mesopotamia, marks on clay become the first spreadsheets. Quantities, names, dates. No money yet, not like coins jingling in a purse, but numbers are starting to hold people to their word. Barter sounds romantic. You're fish for my goat, but it's clunky. Maybe you need grain and I only have pots. Maybe my goat is worth 6 fish and you only brought 3. We start inventing workarounds. We agree on standard measures. We keep running balances. We settle later. Value loosens from objects and floats into the space between us, negotiated and remembered. This is the birth of abstract value, the moment when a promise becomes a kind of portable wealth. Credit, in other words, shows up before cash. Enter the Sumerians, who take clay and turn it into law. In Mesopotamia, writing blossoms not as poetry first, but as bookkeeping. Cuneiform wedges pressed into tablets that recorded deliveries, wages, and obligations. A tablet might specify so many measures of barley due after the harvest, or a sum measured in silver, the unit of account even when metal didn't actually change hands. Terms appear, deadlines, witnesses, interest. You can almost hear the future humming in those marks. Who loaned and why? Often it was temples and palaces, institutions that stored grain and commanded labor. They extended credit to farmers waiting for harvest, to traders moving goods along the rivers, to workers paid in rations. Interest wasn't an afterthought. It was standard. Barley loans commonly carried a hefty percentage, because risk and time had a price. Fail to repay, and the consequences could be brutal. Land seized, family members pledged into bondage, freedom narrowed to a contract's fine print. Debt slavery wasn't a metaphor. It was a system. Rulers, seeing how obligations could spiral into social crisis, occasionally hit the reset button. Proclamations cancelled certain debts, returned collateral, freed debt bondsmen, and let the economy breathe again. In later Babylonian law codes like Hammurabi's, you find ceilings on interest, rules about collateral, protections for the poor in times of flood or drought. The message inside the rules is pragmatic and revealing. Debt fuels trade and farming, but if it devours people, the society that depends on them will choke. Debt, yes. Ruin, no. Or at least, not for everyone. Centuries later, on the Italian peninsula, Romans engraved their rules in bronze, the 12 Tables. This wasn't a philosophy seminar. It was a practical handbook for a hard-nosed city. In these laws, and in the customs they codified, you see obligation tighten into legal form. Debt is no longer merely social pressure or temple oversight. It becomes a civil claim. With procedures, deadlines, and penalties, the neighbors can't simply override with gossip. In early Rome, a debtor could be bound not just by property, but by body. The practice called nexum allowed a creditor to take a person into bondage if the debt went unpaid, a chilling echo of older systems. Stories of abuse, real or remembered, helped spark reform. The Lex Poetalia Papiria, likely in the 4th century BCE, curtailed this personal bondage, steering enforcement toward property rather than flesh. The law, in other words, began to say, your things secure the promise. You do not become the promise. As Roman law matured, it built a toolkit for obligation. There was the stipulatio, a formal Q&A that made a promise legally binding. There were consensual contracts, sale, lease, partnership, mandate, that rested on agreement rather than ceremony. There were devices to secure performance, the pledge of movable goods, the hypothec on land, guarantors who stood behind a debtor's word. Interest rates could be limited by law. Usury could be punished. If someone failed you, you didn't need a feud. You needed an action in court. These Roman tools survive in modern legal DNA. Concepts like consent, obligation, good faith, and secured transactions shape today's mortgages, bonds, and business loans. When your bank files a lien, when a contract spells out default and remedy, you're hearing Rome in the background. The move from personal punishment to property-based security laid the groundwork for a world where credit can scale, because enforcement no longer requires breaking bodies. It requires paperwork, courts, and assets. Across millennia and cultures, the patterns repeat. Farmers borrow against harvests. Traders extend credit along routes from the Tigris to the Mediterranean, from the Indian Ocean to the Silk Road. Households smooth expenses over time, from communal granaries to modern credit cards. States issue promises, coins, bonds, paper, each a claim on future effort. The forms change, the fonts and logos change, but the core remains, a structured belief that tomorrow will pay for today, enforced by rules and reputation. And inside each of us, the old ledger still hums. We say, I owe you one, and feel lighter once we've evened the score. We bristle at freeloaders and admire reliable partners. Obligation can feel like a chain, but it can also feel like belonging, the assurance that someone will show up for you because you have shown up for them. Our fairness instincts, honed long before banking apps, push us to repay kindness and punish cheating. Debt is not just columns and interest. It is emotion and memory, pride and shame, a moral rhythm tapping beneath the math. Look at the systems around you, and you'll see ancient fingerprints. Bankruptcy laws echo old clean slate proclamations, designed to prevent debts from swallowing citizens whole. Interest caps, disclosure rules, and consumer protections are modern heirs to Hammurabi's balance between incentive and mercy. Mortgages and secured loans rely on the Roman shift to property-based guarantees. Credit scores are a bureaucratic descendant of the village reputation. Even our newest tools, digital wallets, online marketplaces, blockchains, are elaborate ways of doing an old thing, writing promises, sharing them, enforcing them, and sometimes forgiving them. The infrastructure has scaled from clay tablets to cloud servers, from temple granaries to central banks, but the dance is the same: time, trust, and a mechanism to bridge them without tearing the community apart. So is debt a burden or a fundamental building block of human cooperation? It's both. It is the weight that keeps promises from floating away and the bridge that lets us cross from need to possibility. The task is not to abolish obligation, but to shape it so that our contracts serve life rather than life serving contracts for us.